Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Grow session. We're so pleased to welcome participants from near and far. My name is Kim Bodemer, and I have the privilege of leading the Talmid of Hebrew College team, your home for quality Jewish adult learning. So Grow sessions are designed to be opportunities for participants to gather and reflect, observe, and wrestle with a variety of interesting and relevant topics. In just 20 days, Jews around the world will recount the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And we're commanded to see ourselves as though we were slaves and we ourselves were redeemed. And starting on the second night of the holiday, we begin counting the Omer, counting for 49 days until we reach the festival of Shavuot, the harvest holiday where we celebrate the revelation of Torah on Mount Sinai. This time can be seen as a spiritual journey, and our presenter today will trace the evolution of the Omer from biblical ritual to Kabbalistic path, focusing on the 7-week journey through the lower Sephirot. Drawing from the Zohar, Loranic Kabbalah, and Hasidic sources, Rabbi Matthew Ponak will show how the 49-day count became a practice of tikkun, repairing what's fractured within ourselves and our world, and how these teachings can still speak powerfully to contemporary life. Before I turn it over to Rabbi Ponak, I want to share a little about him and his work. So Rabbi Ponak is a teacher of Jewish mysticism and an author whose work explores the meeting between classical Kabbalistic writings and contemporary spiritual life. Ordained with honors at Hebrew College in 2020, he also holds a master's degree in Contemplative Religions from the Buddhist-inspired Naropa University. Rabbi Ponak's teachings draw primarily on the last 1,000 years of Jewish spiritual texts, alongside modern psychological and somatic perspectives. A certified focusing professional, he works with individuals and groups to support reflection, integration, and inner repair through self-inquiry. Rabbi Ponak is the author of Embodied Kabbalah, as well as The Path of the Sephirot, a 49-day Omer guide that presents a practical framework for spiritual growth and inner balance. Rabbi Ponak lives in Victoria, British Columbia, with his wife and 2 children, and teaches widely in Jewish and interspiritual settings. So during today's session, we ask that you keep your microphone muted so we don't have any distractions from background noise. And we ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation. Rabbi Ponak has left time at the end, so encourage you to write them down on a piece of paper to hold those. Sometimes writing in the chat can be distracting for the presenter. So if you do need something in the midst of our presentation, please feel free to reach out to either me directly or my colleague, Lori Tischler-Minland. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Matthew Ponak. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Kim. Thank you to Hebrew College and Talmid for hosting me. It's a wonderful honor to be back at the school that I studied at for 5 years. And without exaggerating, 5 incredible years of learning. And it's one thing to have a sense of spirituality or connection to the world or to God. And it's another thing to be able to really get into the sources and to be able to translate them and understand them and to access the wellspring. So a lot of my time spent at Hebrew College was really about gaining the capacity to delve into the texts themselves and to find the place where that meets the moment, if you will. So in a lot of ways, today's presentation is about that. There is a episode in the book of Genesis where Isaac is redigging the wells of his father Abraham that had been sealed up. And he digs deep enough to find what it says in the Torah is living waters. So there's a Hasidic teaching, a Jewish mystical teaching that says what it means to dig the wells of our ancestors. It's not opening up a cistern. It's not a stored place of water that was previously placed there by ancestry. What it means to dig the wells of our ancestors is to use tradition to go deep enough to find living waters, to find the wellspring that's alive today and right now. So this is a little bit of the journey we go on every day, in a sense, Jewishly, but also today. This is not tradition for tradition's sake, but this isn't just the newness in the world and what's needed right now. This is learning about the past to enrich the present and to be open to the evolution of whatever is needed right now. So specifically, from harvest to healing. So harvest, this was a practice, and we're going to go into more details, but essentially that used to be an agriculturally based ritual where there was a big barley harvest that happened, and then for 49 days, there were bits of barley that were offered in the temple. And we're going to look at that journey all the way up until it became arguably today one more about healing. Healing in the sense of inner presence, inner awareness, inner clarity, that this is not an agricultural ritual anymore. This is really about a sense of depth of soul and presence in the world. On the way, we're going to be looking at Kabbalah. And just as a little bit of an introduction right now, what is Kabbalah? I'm sure there's at least one person here who's wondering what is Kabbalah. So there's often two definitions, this word, Kabbalah. It means essentially Jewish spirituality. It's a blanket term that means, what does it mean to not just look at the surface of things, but to seek more deeply, like to go into the layers of life, to the layers of existence, the layers of our soul, in a similar way that we would seek deeper layers in a text. It's not just the obvious reading, it's what's beneath the surface. So that's the first understanding of what Kabbalah means. But the second understanding is this is a term that refers to a particular era of Jewish spirituality that surfaces first in the Middle Ages, at least in writing, and it deals with a technical system of layers of reality. And that's often presented something like this. There's many different iterations, but essentially these are called Sephirot. These are divine qualities or rungs of existence that manifest that we can walk back up again in theory. And Kabbalah is all of those things. So this is all centered around what does it mean to count the Omer? And the term in Hebrew for counting the Omer is Sephirat HaOmer. It's got the word Sephira in there. Sephira, again, divine quality, spiritual rung. So that is essentially the journey we're going on. And what we're really looking at is a question that is asked in every era. And perhaps every day this is asked. And that question is, what can we do to bring blessings into our world? How can our rituals, our words, our actions, our intentions, our meditations allow blessings to flow into our world through our temples, through our sacred times, through ourselves, through our bodies? And there's a schema I want to present right now, a way of understanding the unfolding of Jewish practice throughout the ages. This is something that is based on a single line from the book, the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a medieval or pre-medieval Jewish, we'll call it a mystical, magical book. And it's these three elements, Olam, Shana, Nefesh, that they literally mean world, year, and soul. And a great teacher, a teacher of mine, a teacher of many people, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, understood these as three eras of Jewish practice, Jewish spirituality, and Jewish life. So Olam, he understood as place, as in there is a place where the practice is centered around. That was known as the temple, or perhaps the tabernacle, a portable form of temple. And in essence, in that era, this is where the main service, the divine service, was occurring. It was in a location. At some point, the temple is destroyed, at multiple points, in fact. But when 2,000 years ago, more or less, the second temple is destroyed, a new project begins, a project not centered on place, because this is the beginning of diaspora Judaism. And what do we have instead of sacred place? We have sacred time. It becomes more of the emphasis. Now, obviously, place and time and all of these are alive in every era, but the point here is that this wasn't a temple-centered Sabbath, for example. Shabbat wasn't focused around sacrifices at the temple. Shabbat was a temple in time. It was a moment in the week, or a series of moments, where a sense of sanctity entered. And around this, instead of having 5 or 6 ritual commandments for Shabbat like there are in the Torah, you get thousands of customs and practices that are laying out all of the particular things we do at the different moments in the day. So we journey from place to time. And one of the things Reb Zalman was adding that a lot of us here could probably feel on some level is a transition that is happening in our lifetimes, which is to person, to self. This is not following customs or divine laws for the sake of a sense of divine service. Often this is arising in many people I speak to today. There's a sense of the transformation of self. If it started as a physical temple in space and it becomes a temporal temple, this is the temple of self. This is can we have our lives, our bodies, our inner selves be a place where the divine shines through? So this is, in a sense, what the trajectory looks like as we look in. We're honing in on the counting of the Omer today. And there are different phases that we're going to go through. So the journey from place to time to person is mirrored in the early biblical era, the rabbinic era, into the Kabbalistic, the Hasidic, and our era's Omer. So, put on your seatbelts. We're in for a journey. There's a lot to cover in the next 35 minutes or so. And again, please, if you have a question that comes up, write it down for yourself and ask it at the end. I'm sure there'll be questions, but this is the journey. So we start with the barley offering. The Omer, in its origins, is right here in the Torah. It says, "And you are to number for yourselves from the morrow of the Sabbath, from the day that you bring the elevated sheaf, the Omer. 7 Sabbaths, whole weeks are they to be." So 7 weeks, 7 times 7. The Omer literally means a sheaf, a bundle of barley, and it's being offered day after day in the temple. To get a bit more specific, another section, Deuteronomy, it says, "You shall count off 7 weeks. Start to count the 7 weeks when the sickle is first put to the standing grain, and then you shall observe the Feast of Weeks." Today we call Shavuot. So between Passover and Shavuot is 49 days. Shavuot is the 50th day. And you shall observe the Feast of Weeks for your God, offering your free will contribution as your God has blessed you. Okay. So if we're looking at this question, what does it mean to bring blessings into the world in this place orientation? Well, what actually is happening on the 50th day? Yeah, it's a celebration. It is something that was paired with the moment of revelation on Mount Sinai. This is something the Torah says, essentially, but there's also an indication that at one point there was an agricultural moment happening on Shavuot. Passover is a festival for the barley harvest, and Shavuot is a festival for the wheat harvest. It turns out that wheat harvest and harvests in general are not always guaranteed. There's something a little bit unknown about this whole process. So perhaps these 49 days of offerings had something to do with gratitude for the bounty, but also a hope that the next harvest could be plentiful as well. this is not a strange form of service. For example, Sukkot, the third pilgrimage festival, is the final harvest of the year, and it's also the time when there is a great hope for rain, for renewed rain, for the coming season of growth. And at that time, there are literally water libations poured upon the altar. It's as though you're saying, hey, God, remember this? Here, we're going to give some to you, and we hope to get some back in return. So here's 49 days of barley. May this be a blessing for our wheat harvest as well. So in this era, there is a sense of how do we bring blessings? Well, service in the temple. It's actually quite straightforward. So this is the origins, at least in writing we have, of this 49-day Omer practice. And when the temple is destroyed, we're left with a question. If this is a temple-based practice, how do we deal with it? So the rabbis in the Talmud have discussions around this and ultimately decide on something. The words in English have sort of a funny meaning, but it's lip service. It is service with words, that we're not bringing the barley offerings anymore at this juncture because the place where it was happening doesn't exist for us. So can we do divine service? Can we be in connection to God with this practice, with our words? This is in the same way that prayers come to predominate, like prayer services surface when the temple offerings are no longer possible. So this is a kind of service that's done, a daily counting of these 49 days, even if we're not able to bring the barley offerings themselves. So it is service with words. So the Talmud says, in one of its sections, one of the discussions, Abaye, one of the sages, said, it is a mitzvah to count days. And it is also a mitzvah to count weeks. So they're asking, do we count the day by day? Is it 49 days, or are we counting week by week? Just so we're clear, the halacha today is to count weeks and days. But they're discussing it at this point. It's not clear how to do it. And what they settle on is they go back and they say in this moment, well, the counting is performed only in commemoration of the temple. And so at least at this juncture, therefore one does not need to be so scrupulous to count both days and weeks. Fine. The actual law is different for most people today, but the point is they're commemorating something. This is a connection to this place that was, but what they're doing is they're doing it in time. Okay, so we're moving now that we've sort of established this is the sort of conventional counting. If this teaching is a text, we've gone and we've seen the obvious layer, the one that is right on the top, the pshat. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be journeying into the deeper layers that Kabbalah starts to get into. So Kabbalah surfaces in the Middle Ages, and there's different iterations, there are different forms. But the one that really comes to bear on this practice is from a school called Lurianic Kabbalah. There was a particular teacher who lived in Tzfat, in Eretz Yisrael in the 16th century. And the people around him were the children and grandchildren of people who had been exiled from Spain in the Spanish Inquisition. And they had a story of how the world came into being. And that story really fits in with what it means to count the Omer as a late medieval Kabbalist. And I want you to also keep in mind just this notion of how whatever's happening in our world at the present really informs how we view God, how we view the cosmos. The idea that the great sages, the great teachers are somehow independent from history, it doesn't really shape up. Because in many ways, for the Tzvat Kabbalists of the 16th century, the sky was falling. The world was inherently broken, and it was obvious, and it was all around them. And this is an understanding of the world which really fits into that. So this is the a brief history of everything through Lurianic cosmology. Very brief, because the system itself in this form of Kabbalah, it's unbelievably complicated. I I am not a master of Talmud, but I've studied a fair amount. And I've studied a lot more Kabbalah and Hasidic mysticism. This is bar none the most complicated textual library that I'm aware of in Judaism. And I'm open to being wrong on that, but there's a lot here. So this is a very brief detail. So at the beginning was the infinite. And the infinite, in order to create the finite, retracted itself outwards. And there's this empty space that comes to exist. And only in the place where infinity is not can the finite begin to manifest. And the hope, the goal, before the mistakes were made or before things came tumbling down, was that slowly, slowly, there would be a sense of manifestation rung by rung. Like this is sort of the onion model of the Sephirot, the layers of reality that are one after the other after the other. And hopefully these could become conduits for the infinite to gradually become finite and create a world so that things could manifest. So this was the idea. This was the trajectory. And like the Garden of Eden story, it didn't go as planned. So in particular, once the infinite withdrew itself, there was an effort to send a seed or a spark or an initial beam of light in that would initiate a process in the finite realm. Unfortunately, this light overwhelmed some of the Sephirot. Some of the lower rungs could not contain all of the light for them and the ones below them. And so there was what's called the shattering of the vessels, the shattering of the Sephirot. And as a result of that, the light itself also shattered and scattered to all of the different parts of the universe. So there's something holy in these shards of these vessels that broke, and there's something holy in the light, but they're all intermixed. So the job of the Lurianic Kabbalist is to find ways of redeeming the sparks that have fallen and putting them back in the correct place in the cosmos. And also, when that happens, they separate out from the shards that become this sort of demonic force, this force of negativity in the world. This is one of the explanations of why things aren't quite aligned here all the time, is because things are out of order. The cosmos is broken. And when that happens, the goal is to put things back so that the blessings can flow. The process for the Lurianic Kabbalists was known as tikkun. This is the process of repair. It literally means something like fixing or healing. But let's be clear, in this era, to do tikkun, it wasn't a physical act exclusively at all. It was a meditative act. Any time they were doing a ritual practice, a mitzvah, or actually all kinds of different things in life, they would be holding these really complicated visualizations in their mind of combining divine names to release the sparks. The phrase today, tikkun olam, comes and is most fleshed out in this era. And for the Kabbalists of the Middle Ages, they meant some version of spiritual plumbing or spiritual architecture. Their belief was, if the question is, how do we bring blessings into the world? Well, for the Lurianic Kabbalists, the answer is the reasons blessings aren't coming into the world is because the plumbing is stopped up in the spiritual realm, or things are out of place. If the spiritual realm can be healed, then our world can be healed as well. And the hope is to essentially cause this to happen, cause there to be a direct channel and conduit to the infinite, and so that everything can be just so, everything can be as it should be. And so the efforts done here are essentially repairing the spiritual realm. And this can be done in so many different practices and different moments. There are always opportunities to elevate sparks. This, perhaps you have a sense so far that this is what the Omer is about for the Lurianic Kabbalists. So in Kabbalah itself, there are these 7 lower rungs. They have names. We don't need to go into all of the details at this very moment, but before Loriana Kabbalah, the Zohar, sort of the magnum opus of medieval Kabbalah, it says, in essence, these 49 days of the Omer are these 7 weeks, and we journey through them to be purified week by week so that we can merit the revelation that is the holiday of Shavuot. That if we are pure and if we're ready through these 7 weeks, correlating to these 7 rungs here, these 7 manifestations, by the time we get to the 50th day, we'll be ready to receive. It's not actually that detailed in the Zohar. There's a few metaphors that are used, but that's it. So Lurianic Kabbalah comes along a few hundred years later, and it adds complexity. It says, well, not only are there 7 weeks, but the 7 days in the 7 weeks are very particular in how we're going to be working with them. So every week, every Sephirah has within it 7 permutations, 7 subsets. This is the foundation of the practice people do today when they count the Omer, if they have any kind of Kabbalistic orientation. And it's in a lot of prayer books. This isn't something that people need to train at a particular yeshiva or retreat center to do. It's often written in a lot of prayer books, but it comes from this moment, from the Lurianic Kabbalists. And again, I'll say this is one paragraph from the large section on the inner workings of the Omer. The Lurianic Kabbalists for every day have about, I'm going to say 8 to 15 different divine realm intentions they work with. But this is the one that lived on, partly because it's accessible. And maybe you're sitting listening to this and you're saying, this is accessible? Well, let me tell you, if you don't think this is accessible, you're really not going to find the rest of Lurianic Kabbalah accessible. We're going to leave that all to the side for right now. But in essence, this is the art here. So within every Sephirah, there are these 7 Sephirahs as well. So Chesed means essentially love or loving kindness. It's generosity. It's the yes energy. It's expansiveness. That's Chesed. There's a day, the first day is Chesed within Chesed. And the second day, well, we hop over here and we have Gevura. Gevura means something like power, strength. The literal translations are less important sometimes. They're symbols. So Gevura is the no energy. So if we have the yes energy over here, this is the no energy. So day 2 of the week of Chesed has a Gevura within a Chesed. So there's so many ways we could reflect on that and interpret it. But in essence, if the first day is love within love, the second day is strength within love, something like that. And just to give you just a zoomed in idea, this is sort of what it looks like. These are, all of the big circles are like weeks and all of the little ones are days. And so you can see that over the weeks and over the 49 days, you're counting Sephirah by Sephirah. Because in this era, in this moment, according to the Lurianic Kabbalists, we are healing these broken channels. And specifically, they believed that during the 49 days between Passover and Shavuot, there were what they called gevurot entering the world. There were negative forces, negative energies, things that we needed to spend extra care working with. So you might have heard the phrase today, it's not that uncommon in English to say that in Judaism, we believe we're partners in creation, that God doesn't just conduct the world, that we have to play a role. And that's often paired with this idea of the modern notion of tikkun olam, of being a blessing in the world, of being a good person, of helping create structures in society, giving charity, all of those things that are going to bring in more goodness and blessing. So in the Lurianic terminology, we are partners in creation, and our job is to help God repair the cosmic realm so that the blessings can flow day by day. And this is the time of year where we're making sure that these negative forces are not overwhelming the Sephirot, because they're not whole. There's still a brokenness that exists. The Kabbalah framework appears during the era we could call Rabbinic Judaism. And Rabbinic Judaism is like the time era, right? So this is all mostly synced up with Jewish law, with halakha. But you might begin to see through these kinds of interpretations, through this playing with these maps of the spiritual world, that there can also be some work that surfaces for the self. It's not explicit in these models. In the Middle Ages of Kabbalah, by and large, the emphasis was not on self-work, self-transformation. The emphasis, as I've been saying, was on helping God put Humpty Dumpty back together again so the blessings can flow already. But this system is very flexible. Just like the Torah or the Talmud has so many avenues that we can interpret it through, the same is true for this Kabbalistic model. So here, in the next few hundred years, this sense of the path of person, the era of self-transformation can begin to surface. And we see it clearly in a sort of, again, still sort of transitional way in the world of Hasidic mysticism. So this is a text from the 1800s now. Before Freud and before modern psychology, you can find amazing teachings and perspectives in the world of Hasidic mysticism that they sound like some blend of Judaism and spirituality and psychology. So this is, let's say, maybe the fifth generation of Hasidic mysticism. It starts in the early 1700s, early mid 1700s. And this is the Bnei Yissaschar, also known as the Dean of a Rebbe, and he talks about it. So for him, there is that sense of this Lurianic Kabbalistic infusion, but there's also something more personal going on. So the way he puts it, for the Omer counting, he says in each week, different sparks are clarified from the attributes that fell during the shattering of the vessels. Similarly, there are sparks that fall at all times due to our many sins. So it's not just that we're collecting the sparks and the shards from the beginning of time. Also, we cause some of the negative things to exist in the world. That is, for example, in the attribute of love within a person, right? So all of us have chesed inside of ourselves. All of us have the quality of love inside. It might not be fully clarified, right? So he says that's the attribute of chesed. If one loves something which God has warned to distance oneself from, and we can interpret that idea of misaligned love in all kinds of ways. For our era, what if we said what we really love is shopping? Okay, just to be clear, shopping from time to time, wonderful thing. Let's keep it all in balance. But the idea is that what we're really, really wanting in life is just more shopping or something like that, like for extra items for our home or our closet. I think a lot of Hasidic masters would say there's something not quite aligned there, that this love, this passion maybe could be directed in a more productive way. So this is what it means to clarify a Sephirot, a divine quality in ourselves. It's not to discard it, by the way. There's nothing forbidden in the permanent sense of a love for materiality. But it's about clarifying, getting to the root, understanding what's really at the heart of that. So he says, now the elevation of the sparks, right, the elevation of the divine light through a person's action occurs by elevating each of the attributes to its source. So chesed, this love we find, can we return it? Can we trace it back to its origin? He says, through complete teshuvah, through complete return or repentance. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly and talk about the bigger picture. But that which was only a potential point in one of the attributes will be rectified. It'll be transformed by expanding and raising its head to become a complete and perfect stature within the person. So love, chesed, which we might feel in all kinds of different ways, some holier, some less holy. He says one of the ways that manifests is to love the Creator. And you could call that love of God. You could also call that divine love. You could, other manifestations of chesed in this broader way is just this desire to be loving, this desire to be kind and to give. He's saying that at the root of everything we experience is something sacred. And if we can reflect or pray or meditate or just find some way to cut through the noise, we can get to the essence of that. And every feeling is like that, right? He says to be in awe of God. So there's lots of teachings in the early Hasidic world of if I'm afraid of something and I can find a way to work with that and to meditate on it, I'll come possibly to this sense of awe, that either awe of the Creator or a sense of humility. Like there's actually a lot of value in spending time with things that we might otherwise want to judge. Just one more example if someone has feeling like they're lazy or something like that, or they're not getting anything done. It might be that there's something just inherently wrong with that, or maybe beneath it is there's a desire for ease and for rest, or for choosing what we really want to do. And this perspective, right? I hope it's becoming clarified a little bit that this is not about healing the cosmos right now in this era. This is the 1800s, right? And I think it's only amplified till today. This is not about healing the cosmos. This is about the cosmos inside of us. This is about the light that is scattered or misaligned in each one of us. And how can we tune into that in a way that we're not dismissing it, we're not pushing it aside or repressing it or something like that, as we're allowing it to show us its inherent luminosity. Perhaps easier said than done, right? The question is real about like tools and skillful means here. Like, how are we actually doing this? And there's as many tools and approaches as there are people almost. But Hasidic mysticism, Judaism today, ancient Judaism, dare I say psychology or meditation traditions as well have lots of tools for this kind of thing. But this is the path, and it's not about explicitly illuminating the spiritual realm or bringing barley offerings to say thank you and to increase bounty. This is the temple of self. Can we form a conduit in ourselves to be a blessing, right? This is the question of how do we bring blessings into the world? Well, the evolution from harvest to healing, it tells us that this stage is to find ways to be a blessing. And that can involve and should involve really actions, doing things that are good. Like that in of itself is transformative. But also what this inner model is articulating is to be a blessing partly has to do with clearing the way within ourselves, to find that light. And every feeling, every action is an opportunity. So the Omer counting becomes a systematic, yearly opportunity to week by week, quality by quality, day by day, seek to find that light in all of these aspects of who we are. And it's amazing. Like, I hope you can feel, at least hear the excitement in my voice. Like, this is like a yearly opportunity to be part of a global practice of people day by day cultivating their best selves for the sake of that 50th day where they can, hopefully we can hear some wisdom, find some revelation, and then carry it forward, right? To be a blessing from there, to carry it forward into action. So this is the Omer, right? This is the whole picture now, right? What starts as a barley offering, right? To bring blessings through literal offerings on an altar, to a sense of either with our words or with counting, to really have the capacity to assist divine light in entering our world by clearing channels. And as it's evolving into today, that we ourselves are conduits and channels. And if we can do enough work, and it's not all up to us. And what I mean by that is a lot of the work is to set the stage for transformation to happen. That a lot of this stuff can't be forced in that sense, but creating a context and a lifestyle and a moments of reflection just to allow insight to come through, we become transformed in that. Olam Shana Nefesh, place, time, and person. The Omer is an opportunity for intentionality over the course of 7 weeks. Right? There's not that many mitzvahs that last 49 days. So this is the big picture, right? And we the last source I showed was Hasidic mysticism. And I wanted to let you know, if you aren't already aware, there are a lot of Omer counters, Omer guides that are available today. You Google it or go on Amazon or wherever you get your books, or even videos. There's apps now. There's a ton of opportunities. And just like let's say, the early psychologists, a lot of their big insights came from a great deal of introspection. Like Freud spent time introspecting, and that informed his Freudian psychology. Adler and Jung also spent a lot of time getting to know who they were, and it's really reflected in what they're putting out into the world. I like to think that every Omer counter is a combination of all of this that we're looking at, and also the individual author and writer. There is nothing preventing any of you from writing your own, from having your own ideas and reflections, but these guides can give a sense of format or structure to a practice. So with that in mind, I wanted to go a little bit into a project that I worked on and released last year. This is my book, The Path of the Sephirot. And it's 49 days. Well, there's an introduction, a conclusion. The traditional blessing is in the back for people who, there's a blessing that is said that goes, I think, all the way back to the Talmud for every day. And this works with the 7 weeks and the 7 days. And so a page reflects on that. Now, as I was saying before, there's different ways of translating or interpreting these Sephirot. So this is not a literal translation. This is something that has arisen for me as a result of a lot of study, but there are other ways to understand these Sephirot, let's say. So chesed, love, loving kindness, that's week 1. Boundaries, like the no energy, is week 2. We have Tiferet, harmony. That is, often it's seen as when do I let love through? When do I let boundaries through? It's some kind of harmonizing, peace-seeking principle in any given moment. Netzach is like holy action, like the Energizer Bunny, just sort of that keep on going. Like, how can we cultivate that sense of like an immovable forward, an unstoppable forward motion over time? We have yielding. That's the opposite. That's the polar opposite of Netzach. It's like holy patience, yielding, waiting, abiding, right? There's a whole week on cultivating that. For those of us who get impatient when we're in traffic and beyond, right? Yesod, connection. We can have all of the most, the grandest intentions, but if we're not able to actually connect with people or to bring them into action in some way, right? There's something missing there. So Yesod is about relationality in every sense that we could imagine. And Shekhinah is receiving, right? It's a sense of integration in the last week, but also asking ourselves at the end of every week, Shekhinah, also known as Malchut, the question is, what is blocking me from actualizing love in my life? Those kinds of questions. So just a couple samples to show you. So would be day 1 in this series. Chesed of chesed, loving kindness within loving kindness. And on each page, there's a little boilerplate bumper sticker version, the gift which keeps on giving, right? Love within love, or the earth which brings forth life. And the daily contemplation for this first day is, how does my love inspire others to love? How can my generosity contribute to a larger culture of sharing? Another day in the series, we have Yesod of Gevura. This is day 13, connection within boundaries. Let there be spaces in your togetherness, a quote from the early 20th century author Khalil Gibran. Limitation is an essential ingredient for long-term relationships. So a daily contemplation on this day is, in what ways do you shy away from stating your own preferences with your friends, relatives, or significant other? How could more honesty improve your dynamic long-term, even if social friction may increase temporarily? So these are opportunities. These are reflections. You can use a book such as this. As I say, there's lots of options out there, but there are Omer counters to guide people through, and there's day by day, quality by quality focuses and opportunities. So I'm going to be at the end, and I think also in the email, sending out a presenter package. Essentially, I'm going to give you a PDF that has these 7 weeks from the book inside of them. You could use them. You don't have to do day by day. Also, you could just say, what is the theme of this week? It's just a thank you for joining today. But in essence, this is like one of the samples. This is week 5. This is Hood. This is yielding, and there's some information there. But you'll have this that you can you'll have one for each week of the Omer, and you can use those starting on the second night of Passover if you want to count in that way as well. So this is this is what I have. This is my opening offer here. This is the beginning. And we have 15 minutes or 13 minutes or so. If take a moment to gather yourselves, but this is what I wanted to present, and I'd love to hear questions, thoughts, and yeah, happy to go anywhere from this moment. And Kim, is there a particular style people should be asking their questions in, unmuting or raising their hands?
I would recommend if you have a question that you use the feature in Zoom that asks you to raise your hand. I think that would be the easiest way. And maybe I'll get us started because I have a question that came up as a result of your wonderful presentation. I wonder if you can speak just for a moment about your own personal experience with counting the Omer and what way, I mean, I don't know how long you've been doing this practice, but in what way did you feel different as a result of having done this? And does that change every time you do it?
It does change every time I do it. One of the wonderful things about a yearly cycle, and whether that's reading Torah every week or different holidays, it's like a spiral that there are themes that repeat every year, but there's also newness each time around. So I encountered this practice as a model probably as a teenager for the first time. I was hanging out with sort of Kabbalistically inclined people at various locations, and I didn't really get into the essence of the subdivisions of the days until I was a rabbi, quite frankly. I wanted to explore it in a meaningful, personalized way. But even after all of the learning and whatever, and all the years I had been trying to do it, it took some real intense focus to ask, really, what does it mean to have Hod within Tiferet? Because that's not obvious, right? And so maybe this is a bit cliche, but I learn a lot when I teach. So when I had this initial project, actually this book started off as a series of Facebook posts. And I was doing one a day because I wanted to, it was partly a practice for myself. It was obviously a practice for people who were following it on Facebook, but it was an opportunity to really hone in on what does this mean? What's the difference between Netzach of Hod versus Hod of Netzach? So a lot of the fruits of this are experienced and I'll say again personally because you asked in a sense of like there might be a kind of an aha moment that dawns, right? Like how, for example, we're talking about Yesod and connection, like how are boundaries my ally and how are they my enemy? How is lack of connection hurting me on any given day, right? And it turns out these are very universal themes and quite relevant, right? So I would say there's I don't think there's any day that I've focused in on these that I haven't learned something. I'll add one other piece. There's a teaching from a Hasidic master named Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, where he says every day of the Omer you can see that quality if you just open your eyes to it. So that's a different orientation, but I love the idea of on day two, if you're looking for how love can actually be setting boundaries or whatever, like there's just like keep your eyes open and look for signs. It's a very fruitful and flexible practice as well. Well, thank you. And I see Sharon and Jean.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. I've been doing the Omer count for a few years as best as I can, but one thing that's always been confusing to me is weeks versus the days. Which informs which? In other words, what's the difference between Hesed in Gevura and Gevura in Hesed? Or are there differences?
Right. So the way that I work with it, and I wish I could give you the answer. I don't know if there is the answer, but this is one of the challenges, by the way, right? You're pointing at it. So in Hebrew, right? Let's say we're doing Chesed of Gevura. It's Shebe is the phraseology there. So it's literally Chesed or love that is within or that is through boundaries. So the way I work with that, or way I think about it, and again, like I'm open to other interpretations. But what does it mean when love emerges as a result of boundaries? Right? So sometimes we need a bit of space to feel loving, right? Distance makes the heart grow fonder, or something like that. Versus gevura shebechesed would be boundaries which emerge through love. So kill them with kindness, right? Something like that. There's a way in which it's sort of one is emerging from the other. So that's how, Rabbi Ponak deals with it, at least. So I hope that's helpful. Thanks for your question. I saw another hand up a second ago, and I think it came down possibly, but
I think it was me.
yes.
I can't quite see because there's a banner above and I don't know if the hand is still there. Thank you so much. This was so lovely and accessible. I have one reflection and then a question. So the notion of orientations, I was so clarifying the olam, shana, and nefesh. But I'm also wondering if when there was place, the temple, people still weren't feeling these other things. So it's hard to imagine someone bringing a sacrifice and not feeling a reflection inward and looking at qualities and wanting to feel close to the divine.
I
I'm
agree.
thinking, yeah. So I was just wondering if how you could hold both of those, like,
Yeah, yes. So once we kind of lay out this large framework, the next question, or one of the questions that arises, is, wait a minute, you're telling me there was no sense of self-transformation at all? Yeah. There also, we have places of worship in our time-bound rabbinic mindset, right? This era, and also there's lots of people who do not see themselves as partaking in self-transformation today during the Omer. Like, I don't want to put anyone in any category. This is like a one way of understanding the unfolding, but people are where they are also. And there's lots of value in each element. Something that I think is interesting is not everyone got to bring the barley offering, right? These were Kohanim, these were the priests. This wasn't an everyone practice. Maybe there would be a sense of witnessing or contributing. I don't know, but there's something about the place era that it's quite reserved for a select few. So I want to just maybe use that as a way of broadening the sense of what it can mean that it's a place versus a person-centered. I mean, the Lurianic Kabbalists were not exactly populists or whatever we'd say. It was a very select group also. To be able to do their complicated meditations, like, I wouldn't place myself amongst those people. I mean, you need years of training at least, and it's kind of elitist. So as well, there's something, there is a lot of truth to the idea that everything's sort of a microcosm for everything else. And I think the purpose of a model like that unfolding over the years is to say, like, there are times where what's the focal point of this? So from Jerusalem or from the temple to this sacred season diaspora practice to a lot of people today, I would say increasingly what does this mean to me? And how can I be a conduit, or how can I be transformed or grow through the practice?
thank you. That's great. And then a question: did Musar grow out of the notion of counting the Omer as a spiritual practice? The whole idea of the midot and qualities, and we're supposed to look at them and reflect and do kind of spiritual accounting.
That is a really big question, actually, and I'll see if I can answer it. Kind of essentially, the Musar, if people don't know, it's sort of like ethical cultivation. Jewish orientations. It formally begins with Rabbi Yisrael Salanter in the 1800s, who is not Hasidic or Kabbalistic in orientation, but people trace that sort of self-discipline, ethical cultivation back thousands of years, or at least 1,000 years. And so the question of chicken or the egg, I would say, if I had to, there are interweavings between Kabbalah and Hasidut and Musar, but in many cases, they're opposed to each other in a sense, not like necessarily combative, but these are different approaches. But there's a lot of overlaps. Like the Sephirot, the divine qualities, can also be called midot, and often are. And when they're midot, they're attributes or qualities. But when Hasidic writings first came out, they were called Musar. That was like the place where they were put in, the category. So let's say that there are family relationships between these two traditions within Judaism.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
For sure. I see Hannah has her hand up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to share that I appreciate your talk today, and I wanted to show you this painting
Ah.
of my father.
Oh, wow.
So thank you so much, and it was nice to hear that you learned in Naropa, and you're living in Canada. I grew up there, so thank you. Thank
I
you for
know your
today.
brothers. Nice to meet you. I think we've been in touch in the past. Nice to finally meet you. Okay. Thank you for attending. That's an honor. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet or has any questions or comments? I see some people I've never met before, some people I have. Anyone's this is your moment.
Well, as our time is drawing to a close, I want to take a moment just to thank you for really a wonderful hour of learning and reflection. I'm sure many of us are inspired by your words today, and your teaching, and we so appreciate that presenter gift that I'm sure you're going to maybe put in the chat,
Yeah,
and
in the
we will
chat,
also
right.
send out as part of our regular follow-up email, which will include a recording of today's session. I want to remind you that all of our learners to know that we offer opportunities for learning and growing throughout the year. And I invite you to check out our online course catalog. My colleague Lori will put that link in the chat, and she'll also put in the chat for 2 upcoming grow sessions, which I want to take just a moment to highlight for you. In April, a Hebrew College Provost, Rabbi Dan Judson, will be in conversation with Rabbi Leon Morris, who's the president of the Pardes Institute for Jewish Studies in Jerusalem. And they're going to discuss the experience of leading an Israeli organization at a time of crisis. Rabbi Morris is going to share his perspective on life in Jerusalem now, and the role of pluralistic Jewish learning in Israeli society. And then in May, Jody Kipnis, the co-founder and president and CEO of the Legacy Foundation, is going to speak about building moral courage in a fragile democracy. Jody's going to share how her life-changing journey to Poland in 2018 inspired her to set out to build more than a museum of history, but rather to build a space that asks urgent questions of the present. So that's the new Holocaust Museum that's opening here in Boston. So we hope that you'll join us for one or both of those. And again, thank you for joining us today. And I invite you to continue to grow and wrestle, and we won't see each other before Passover. So wishing you all a meaningful journey to freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.